We are live. Charles Moscowitz here. Thanks for joining me, everyone. Michael D. Shaw is my guest. We're live streaming, we're downloading, we're on podcasting, we're everywhere. So, Mike, I mean, obviously,
Chuck, don't forget the phone number, so people
oh
can
well,
consult us.
I didn't even bother with it because I don't. The phone lines don't light up, and I actually have been given permission again to go back on TikTok, but I'm not going to bother because I know they'll shut me down. Um, it's just the way it goes. I'm gonna have to put the aside the phone number, but
Right.
if you want to comment, you could do it through the Rumble station and through Kicks, and that'll show up here. So, Mike, I mean, I'm concerned because I think that the fact that number one, Kamala Harris, while she may be a communist, she is able to string a sentence together. So it's a big contrast between her and Biden. And
yeah, well, that's where the sugar high is, right? That it's based on, at least she's semi-coherent, although I wouldn't push that too far. But she is able to put a sentence together. And look at it from their point of view. They've had to play this stupid game where they have a guy who essentially can't do anything that they were cheerleading for. So I think that is the bump here, and I believe it's going to go away because as soon as she gets out there and starts saying anything, it's going to backfire.
Well, so far she hasn't done an interview. She hasn't answered a question, and it's a lot of kind of happy talk, a lot of ragtime.
Yeah.
But yes, I mean, I think that once she's put up on the debate stage, God willing, Trump will be shot. I mean, Trump's amazing. I mean, but the other thing that worries me is that she does have this leftist cult following, very similar to Bernie Sanders, and she is very much of that ilk. And the interview I saw him do with the black reporters in Chicago, I'm sure you probably saw that, right?
Yeah.
The woman who interviewed him was literally screaming and having a meltdown. It was like, I know this is sort of a derogatory term, but it was like a Karen type of situation. And I remember that during the last election of 2020, Trump did an interview with Savannah Guthrie, and it was the same thing. She was literally screaming at him. It was almost like she was ready to start beating him up, like assaulting him. And I think that he has that effect on these leftist women, that they just are going berserk. And I'm speaking here, frankly, without getting into details, from personal experience, okay? That these women are just absolutely, completely out of their minds. And I'm afraid that that's the core constituency that's going to possibly defeat Trump.
Well, I think part of the reason for their anger is that while they're yelling at him, they're also realizing that they've been programmed and are completely ignorant. I mean, one of the statements that you just have to shake your head when he says, which is correct, that he's done more for the black community than any president, maybe except Lincoln. And that's debatable, frankly.
Right.
And then she said, well, no, what about Lyndon Johnson? Without having any knowledge that Lyndon Johnson was no friend of blacks, that was completely political. He had the infamous statement that anybody with an IQ above room temperature remembers, and he didn't back down from it. When the Civil Rights Law was passed, he said, I'll have those ends voting Democrat for the next 200 years. That's the truth. They've never denied that.
Right.
Okay. So the fact that either she doesn't know that, which is possible because she's stupid, but when they try to confront this guy and he comes back with arguments, it's pathetic.
Right. And Trump, I thought, handled himself brilliantly.
He did. He kept his cool.
He did. And I know that he's become experienced, and J.D. Vance does the same thing, where when they start to attack and interrupt, he just keeps talking very coolly. He just keeps going ahead. He doesn't get off his mark. He's not thrown off. He doesn't get distracted. He stays in and he stays on it. And I think that they're both very good at that. And that's a big hope. Now I saw an interview with, I don't know, do you know who James Lindsay is?
James Lindsay.
He's an academic who did this incredible trick on the academic left when he submitted a paper basically borrowing information from Mein Kampf and claiming that this was, use all the buzzwords of the left, and they accepted it in a scholarly journal, and then he exposed
Oh,
them.
yeah, I didn't remember his name. Okay.
Yeah, he's a very interesting guy, and he did an interview where he pointed out that when Kamala Harris talks about, the way, what the hell that thing with the, we have to imagine the way of the by letting go of the past, and we're going to be in the present. That
Not
thing
being
that
burdened by the past, and
don't be
she said
burdened by the past. And she went around and kept repeating that thing over and over again in many speeches. And people looked at that and they said, "Oh, that's like a bunch of fluff. It's a bunch of no, it doesn't mean anything. It's word salad, as I've heard it
yeah,
described." But Lindsay points out that her father was a Marxist professor,
yeah.
and that is classic Marxism. And he shows how Mao Zedong and Lenin. This is a basic of Marxism, to basically that the past is evil. You have to only be in the present, and suddenly create this new way of being. This to remove everything that had burdened himself. The past is a burden, and that she is fully conscious of that as the daughter of a Marxist professor. She's no dummy. She is articulating a leftist position. And I would point out to listeners here that if and when a nation elects somebody that's that far left, it's very difficult to come back from that. Look at Venezuela, for example. They elected Chavez, Hugo Chavez, about 30 years ago, and look what's happened. Once they get power, they're never. They elected Hamas in Gaza. Once they have power, they're going to take over all the institutions of power, and they're never going to leave. Or to get rid of them, I mean, right now, look what's going on in Venezuela. They're realizing that the election was openly stolen, right out. Even the New York Times admits this. And yet he's putting up concentration camps now for re-education, and he's just moving forward, the dictator Maduro. And to get rid of him now, and the fact that they've taken a country that was one of the biggest economies in the Western Hemisphere and have turned it into a disaster, it's going to take decades to get rid of that, if they ever do.
Yeah, well, that's a very good point, but we don't have to look to Venezuela. The United States was permanently changed with Franklin Roosevelt. All
Right.
those agencies and all those socialistic programs never went away. All right. Reagan didn't eliminate any. It
But they
expanded.
didn't get the kind of foothold that they may get now. And we're not in a position in this point in the world where we can have that kind of thing. I mean, we have
You're
open
absolutely
borders
right.
where even the New York Times admits almost 10 million illegal aliens have crossed into the border, people we have no idea who they are. And the fact that, if Harris is elected, I mean, that's going to be basically a merge between the United States, Mexico, and Canada, the tri-state, fantasy that used to be talked about by the Bird Society, and they're absolutely right. And that we're going to see a regional, the United States will become nothing more than kind of the mid-province of this empire, and there's going to be a massive continuation. We're going to see. I mean, the world feels like it's on the verge of World War III between Ukraine and Israel and Taiwan and other flashpoints. We now have, you know, people are rebelling and rioting in Western democracies like Great Britain, for example, right now, at the slaughter of 3 girls. And you know, it's like there's a feeling of that this international leftist establishment is really on the verge of either closing the door on the future for any of us or losing. This is a very pivotal election. And I would say that to people that want to think it's fine and cool and trendy to elect a person who is culturally interesting, like Kamala Harris, because it'll be a great experiment, I would just say that, well, we should never do it, but if we are going to do it, this ain't the time for that. Take a look at the dollar. I mean, it costs 15 cents to get a McDonald's hamburger, okay? That means like for a working family of five, that's $75 to go to frickin' McDonald's. And that's going to get worse to the point where now they've admitted that $3 trillion deficit, 70% of the tax revenue goes to maintain that debt. And already Yellen is talking about expanding it to a regular borrowing of $500 billion a year.
Right. Well, this is the other side of that. All right. That the leftist thing expands. And if you've been following the situation in the UK, you see that the government's primary emphasis is not on fixing this horrific immigration problem, but putting down these demonstrations. And when that soy boy prime minister gave his talk, that's all he talked about. He did not even acknowledge the death of those 3 little girls specifically.
No.
But he was talking about how we have to keep order and so on. And New Zealand, it is funny how all these British countries became communist. All right. If you look at New Zealand, that was infamous during the pandemic.
Yes.
They have new laws coming out that are going to allow them to force injections on people. So
that's coming here. That's coming. If people don't question that,
they don't learn, and they double down. And this is the other thing. And I saw this with the JFK administration. This sort of, the real expression, but we'll call it stuff happens theory of history.
Right.
All right. I was, in junior high during the Cuban Missile Crisis. And this is portrayed as all of a sudden this thing happened and so on. And poor John Kennedy had to deal with it. And nothing was further from the truth, that he brought this on himself. And he was regarded as some hero for standing up. It was only many, many, many years later that the only way this was diffused is we agreed to take missiles out of Turkey.
Right. Well,
so the point is that we're going from one mistake to another, to another, to another, and it's stuff happens. It had nothing to do, the horrible wars of the 20th century had nothing at all to do with Wilson and the administrations that came in. And
it just sort of happened.
Yeah,
I agree. And I think that they're continuing to try to finally close their grip on the world. And, you have, as I've said, the planned inundation of the United States of 10 million illegal aliens. You've got the value of the dollar. People don't become insolvent. It could implode, which will wipe out all of your pension, your savings, your income, your retirement. These are serious matters. These things
are serious matters that most people don't have time to think about,
right?
Because they're too worried about making a living. I mean, I'm in the
$15 to go to McDonald's, and then the third
business, and I buy stuff that's denominated in Swiss francs, and the dollar has depreciated against the Swiss franc tremendously,
right?
Which obviously affects the prices of these items in the U.S. But that is, in a sense, hidden from the average normie that, doesn't get involved with this. And, not that they should. But this has been terrible management all the way through. I have no idea how people, other than be toe-tag Democrats, can have a single good thing to say about the Joe Biden administration. but yet you'll read these
Oh,
letters
they're
to the
holding him up like he's the next Washington.
yeah,
I mean, it's just, and then you ask a little mild question like, can you name something that he did?
yeah.
Okay, so he fixed the price of diabetes drugs. Fine. I mean, they can't come up with anything but some small potatoes thing. And that brings me to my third leg on the stool here. And this, I will point to the Olympic events in Paris.
Oh,
And there were now two cases, if not a third case, where a girl had to get into a boxing ring with a guy and in one case she has brain damage. Now, if that
yeah.
was my daughter, I would have shown up with a gun and I would have blown his head off.
All right.
But
Well, let me stop you right there. That's the problem. All right. I followed this carefully. The two guys who are competing in the female boxing were disallowed from other organized boxing events. But in the
why is
misplaced
that?
steal,
Because they're dressed as girls? Or
because they're XY males.
okay.
All right.
And yet the
And
Olympic Committee is allowing it to go forward. So I did a
no,
little
no, no,
research.
Chuck, they're not allowing it. They're encouraging it.
Oh, they are, because I did a little slight deep dive in it, and I looked at the International Olympic Committee rules on this, and they're very proud of the fact that they've actually gotten rid of restrictions for guys to be going into girls' sports and vice versa. Apparently in the very beginning of this whole phenomena, they actually had at least some semblance of sense in that they said that if a guy wants to compete as a girl, he has to be castrated. Okay. They got rid of that. Then they said he has to have sex hormones, to reduce his
Right.
testosterone and a couple other things. Now they've gotten rid of that, and they can't ask that now. And the left wing supporters of this bizarre agenda are cheering. Oh, we're getting more progressive. You can't ask somebody those questions. It's discrimination. You can't to actually ask how somebody became a woman is like ignorant and bigoted and prejudiced. And so they're going forward now with doing something that would have been unthinkable, I think, even 5 years ago. Having a guy go in a boxing ring with a girl and knock her out. And in one case, giving her brain damage. Whatever happened to protecting girls from some thug who is going to go up and what kind of a guy would do this? You're going to go into a ring and start punching a girl? What the hell is going on here?
Oh, what the hell is going on is you have to remember, and in my latest piece, I do remind people that the Olympics, when they started in Greece, were always a pagan event and consisted
Right.
at the beginning of, I think, two events. One was wrestling, and the other were various races. They were all in the nude. All right. You can
Well,
draw
that's
your own
ancient Greece.
conclusion about Greek
That's
guys running around nude. All right.
right.
So it was considered pagan, and the Emperor Theodosius outlawed these games in the fourth century. He
Well,
was
that's what the Hanukkah rebellion was all about. One of the things is that Matisyahu and the Hasmoneans, they didn't want to have that going on in Judea. They were like, this is pagan, and there's a couple of other things like that they kicked them out, and it led to the Hanukkah rebellion. So
well, that's right. And isn't it funny that you have to read between the lines in history that the main aspect of paganism, besides it being atheist, was homosexuality. No one wants to admit that.
right, no, that's right. I mean, the whole business of like worship at the idols.
Yeah.
It's not just the fact that they're worshiping a stone image but they're throwing living babies into the belly of a burning beast, image of Moloch. But it was all the orgies and everything else going about around the idol, and the Torah does at least certainly a more deep commentary. It totally lays this out, that it was all the various practices, the antinomian practices of around the idol, the overthrowing of the moral order, the turning around. It's in Christianity, it's expressed as Satanism, This idea that you turn everything on its head. The black mass turns the crucifix upside down and engages. It takes the host and it turns it into like Satan, because you have to, in a sense, invert everything about it as a way to usher in some kind of a new age, that because the world sinks to such an evil level that there is a new age that develops. This was the idea behind the false messiahs that plagued the Jewish world in the 16th century, Shabtai Zvi and Jacob Frank, and that they gained a pretty big following, by the way, within Judaism. And they did form a secret society. I don't know if it's still around, but if it isn't, it may as well be, because they do
Well, it
put
may as
on.
well be, because the Jews, look at Josh Shapiro, who had tweeted in 2020, a trans woman is really a woman.
Oh
So
man,
what is that guy's problem? Why even say that? Just to
this
be
is
cool?
what they. And if you disagree, not only are you called, names, but you could get in big trouble.
Yeah.
I mean, and by the way, I've seen it in my own life. If you don't go like with their pronouns, you're in trouble. This is a shrill, I mean, that goes to anytime you have a situation where people have to regurgitate something that is obviously scientifically untrue,
Right.
and you have to declare it as true. You're going to have a rather shrill group of people, forming the wagons around that, because in order to keep that alive. And this is a classic example of that. And I only bring up the Olympic situation because if Harris is elected, that's going to be the law of the land. It's going to be, there'll be no more men and women. Everything will be whatever you say it is. I had, I'm getting a degree now at Arizona State University online, and one of the young women in my class, you're supposed to post, why do you want to study sociology? Why do you want to blah blah blah? She posted that she's studying women's issues, even though she realizes that she was assigned at birth a woman. And so
She
I
really
hope,
believes that.
yeah, and I hope I'm not in trouble because I want to get the degree. But and I very politely responded, because we're supposed to interact.
Yeah.
I said, could you please clarify this for me? Exactly who did the assignment, and by what criterion did they use to make this assignment? I mean, if someone is going to get assigned as a woman or a man, it seems to me, first of all, putting aside the science of that, which is not there, the height of arrogance to think that some doctor or nurse gets to give you an assignment of what you are. That's inhuman. Anyway.
Well, it's a totalitarian mentality. It's people that want to embrace this, if you will, pagan culture.
So Shapiro's up to his neck in this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
If she picks him, and it looks like she very well may. And
I mean, when there were a lot of posts on X about this Olympic situation with both the female boxing and the opening ceremony, and
yeah, which was a completely blasphemous and an utter anti-Christian and anti-Catholic display. And I think that they've even had to apologize, because it offended most of the nations of the world, including most of the Islamic nations.
right.
Didn't like it. I mean, it was so over the top, so offensive.
Well, here's the thing. Why did they have $150 million to spend on the opening and closing ceremonies, but didn't have enough money to have enough restrooms in the Olympic Village or provide air conditioning? All right. So here's the thing. And again, this is a pet peeve with me. All right. You can talk about the individual performances of athletes, and isn't that nice? But the fact that this is such a disgusting ceremony, that you're beating women up as a sport, literally, and people are mindlessly supporting this. So there was one posting on X which said, this crap is going to go on until women refuse to participate. To which I responded, don't hold your breath. All right. Women are,
Yeah,
I'm sorry, very compliant. They're going to say, wow, I trained for this so and so and so, and we're going to be in it. And why should we quit? And you know what? Even Riley Gaines,
yeah.
who's this big champion of keeping men out of women's sports, she participated, lest we forget. So they're all sheep, all right?
Well, they
And
all are in agreement with this agenda. It's a sexual revolution. It's like when I ran against Barney Frank for Congress back in 2004, you had the AIDS epidemic, and I mentioned at the time, and people said I was crazy, that here you have an openly gay leader who very easily could have said, you know something, this is a disease, and we have to take certain precautions to make sure that people don't get this horrible disease and die a painful death, like shutting down the gay bathhouses and maybe not engaging in certain unwholesome activities that could spread the disease. But they didn't do that because it would have interrupted the sexual revolution. Instead, they accused everybody else, including Reagan, of being bigots because they weren't sending more money and because they weren't, they were somehow at fault. And the result is, and I said this at the time, that Frank has the blood of tens of thousands of gay men on his hands because he was in a position where he could have had some influence and maybe done something to save people's lives and treated this thing like a disease instead of like a political football. But they won't because it might interrupt the sexual revolution started by Kinsey. And the same thing applies here. The revolution is more valuable than the fact that some poor girl is going to have brain damage because a guy went in and punched her in the head. That's just a small bump on the road. I mean, we're going to, you got to crack a few eggs to make an omelet and the greater good. Plus, Macron's wife apparently is trans, according to actually a lot of sources, including
including Archbishop Vigano.
Vigano. And I know I don't, I mean, I'm not a big fan of what's her name, Owens, Candace Owens. But I think that now, I mean, I don't know if they're real, but there was plenty of photographic evidence to show that she was a man. Anyway, the point is, I only bring it up, and I'm not making it as a flat statement here. And by the way, I'm not running this today on TikTok because I know I'd be in trouble. But the fact is that very well may go to why Macron, as the host country, the head of the host country, is so on board with all of this. I don't know.
Well, it's a pagan agenda, and then of course I get tired of having to remind people of this. There were all these postings of how did all this crap start, and I said a broken record. I keep going back to the school prayer decisions of the early 1960s, and we've talked about this, and there were plenty of people against it, including JFK. But that is what began turning the tide against religion, not only in the public square, religion in the United States, turning the U.S. into a functionally atheistic country. And certainly Western Europe was way ahead of that. I mean, Europe hasn't been Christian for over 100 years. So there you are. But here's the thing. The Olympics are still an institution, right? And they're going to go
much part of this, and that, yeah, I mean,
here I'm falling into this trap. Right? There's other postings on how did the FDA approve these puberty blockers, which are so dangerous? Hello, the FDA hasn't been worth a damn for 40 years. You just saw it
with COVID. I mean, it's I think there's enough information that's come out about that. So getting back to the subject of whether President Trump can win, I think that it's obvious at this point. You and I have talked about it, even mainstream. I mean, even the normies know this, that they tried to murder him. I mean, that's pretty obvious. I mean,
I don't think there's any doubt.
No, I mean, it was obvious, and the fact, the obvious first proof is that they are refusing to answer any questions. The woman that was fired, Cheadle, didn't answer a single question. Now the new guy apparently is doing the same thing, and that Congress subpoenaed Mayorkas, who I personally think is behind all of it, and a couple of other high-level Biden people, and they just said, "We're not coming. We're ignoring the subpoena." And by the way, save your papers. No, we're not saving anything. We're going to delete it all. And they just do they have that kind of power at this point? I mean, Steve Bannon right now is sitting in a prison cell because
Yeah,
he
exactly.
he did this, and Peter Navarro had to do a 4-month prison term because they refused to cooperate with a congressional subpoena from a committee that's now been discredited and actually denounced by the president speaker of the House, who finally did something and said that this committee was not legitimate. They had no authority in terms of the precedent of how committees function. And yet these guys are not answering any questions. I mean, this is a situation where you have a government that is in a rogue government, and their fingerprints are all over this.
Well, I don't think anything's going to change until you get out of this institutional mentality. In other words, there's been complaints about the Secret Service. I mean, Bongino has been
He has.
on this for a couple of years, but well, it's a Secret Service. You know what? Close the agencies, get private security in the meantime, and try to start something new. All right.
Oh, if I were Trump, I wouldn't have them anywhere near.
Well, he may do that. But see, these are radical propositions, right? Well, Mike, what are you going to do without the FDA? Very simple. I'll put together a blue ribbon commission of medical practitioners and academics, and we'll submit the same clinical trial data to them, save a lot of money, and save a lot of lives. You don't need the agency, all right?
Yeah,
You
which is,
don't
by the
need
way,
this
completely
agency.
beholden to big pharma. Putting that aside,
But this is it. This is the typical American thing. We have to reform. No, sometimes you have to burn it down. All right. There's
I
no
agree.
reforming these
No.
agencies.
And while they're
because
burning, they should get rid of the FBI and the the Department of Homeland Security, which was set up under Bush, and certainly the Department of Education, which hasn't really contributed to the single improvement of a single student in this country. These are
well,
massive.
on that subject, and I'm a minority on this. You, I'm sure, disagree with me. I always thought Reagan, his biggest claim to fame was he was fortunate enough to run against weak opposition, and that the hostages were in Iran. All right, he had a perfect chance to eliminate Department of Education. Didn't do it.
No, he didn't do diddly squat. I think Reagan kind of became a little different after he was shot.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it sort of was a clear message to play ball. You know,
Exactly.
we're in charge here. I mean, look what they did to Kennedy. Even Jimmy Carter was had a gun put to his head when he did a mild moment when he was going to release all of the information about Kennedy. They are not playing. You know, these people. You know, this isn't beanbag. I mean, they're playing for keeps, which gets me to fear that President Trump is going to be shot. You know, I don't see if he, you know, he is. I'm sure that the polls that are being taken by the insider people running Harris's thing and Trump's thing, for that matter, show him winning a landslide. And as the date, you know, the time moves forward, either he's going to be shot or he's going to strike a deal with these people, just like Reagan did, and say, okay, fine, you can keep your deep state, you know, but maybe I'll do a few things just around the edges to as window dressing. I mean, it really comes down to those two options.
I don't know that he's that kind of guy in that he was never really a politician. I mean, Reagan came up.
Yeah, but now they've blown off a piece of his ear. You don't have to be a politician to get that message. I'm just saying. I mean, and he wants to be elected.
Yeah, but you know what? It cuts both ways. All right. If you openly try to assassinate me, I can either become scared or become more pissed off. and then I'll bring in my own private security. I'll bar the Secret Service, and fool me twice, shame on me, kind of thing.
I hope he
Uh,
does that. I really hope that Trump gets off his wallet and maybe shells out about, I mean, Giuliani has talked about this. He needs to pay out maybe about $10 million to actually get, a true loyal security service. Maybe he should get Eric Prince involved from Blackwater.
well, that's a good recommendation, but I don't think he's stupid enough to rely on that corrupt agency.
I hope
And
not.
it's probably making him more pissed off. And the amazing thing about it was that they couldn't even pull that off. I mean, thank God they didn't. But good
Just
grief.
by a hair. I mean, they really, I think had they done it, and I think they had every intention of doing it. First of all, I don't think Biden would have stepped down. They would have just, why would he have to? I mean, they would
You're
just keep
absolutely
doing it.
right.
Yeah, I mean, that wouldn't have changed. They would have
But
just
they're
rode that
relying
out.
on the fact that people are extremely uncomfortable recognizing evil. Oh no, it's just not
Oh, yeah.
possible
No,
that this could be an
and they
inside job.
rely on that. I mean, there's a sociological term for this. It's not confirmation bias, but it's like we turn a blind eye to evil, which empowers it and which makes it actually come right out onto Main Street as it has,
Right.
and because it gets more bold, and it finds evil tends to find a certain level of energy and excitement in terms of displaying itself publicly. It
Well,
doesn't
when
like to be.
people challenge me on that, I always have a stock answer. Had their intent been to assassinate him, what would they have done differently?
Well, I mean, look, they obviously did intend to do it, and
Yeah, well,
Trump,
that's my point.
he even Biden himself in his phone call to Trump said, "Well, I guess that you missed the bullet by moving your head." I mean, and that was, it sort of seems like he was expecting it. How did he even know this? This was, I mean, and I think that it's just one of those. I mean, I think that there was a divine element to it. Maybe God is helping protecting Trump. I mean, I don't want to say that because next time maybe God won't protect Trump. Every time you say that, you have to be careful because we don't know that. We don't know the mind of God.
Well, we don't
It,
know the mind of God, but you can start thinking about it.
you do.
Okay. I mean, how about this? These women got the crap beat out of them in the Olympics as a punishment for abortion and a pagan opening ceremony. Because this is all because of women. That the empowerment of women is what brought the gay agenda to the forefront. Please call somebody and argue with me on that.
No, I wouldn't argue with that. And I also would note that abortion seems to be the big calling card of this whole election. And it's what makes these women, apparently, they seem to go out of their minds. I've seen this. And it's not even an issue. What I would point to people is that when we're on the verge of World War III, we're on the verge of a meltdown of our dollar, we're on the verge of all this crap. And, you have a couple of red states who passed highly restrictive abortion laws. Give me a break. It's not a federal issue, right? It really isn't at this point. Now that Roe versus Wade has been rescinded, you might have some people on the far left who want to have a national, amendment to the Constitution guaranteeing abortion up to the moment of birth. And you might have on the other side an amendment to ban abortion forever at the point of conception. But the fact is that neither of those two things are going to happen. And Trump has been very clear about it. He's like, this is an issue that's up to the states. That's what Roe versus Wade did. It kicked the rescinding of it. It basically kicked this issue back to the states with a democratic people that they like to crow about democracy. Well, in a democracy, you have the state legislators reflect the value of the people of that state and make abortion laws. And if you don't like it, you elect someone else. I mean, here in Massachusetts, they've gone even further to the liberal side. They now allow abortion even after the baby's born.
Yeah.
But the point is, it's a state issue. It's nothing to do with this election, and that they're demagoguing it and claiming that you know Trump the Trump abortion laws. No, these are state abortion laws, and ultimately, over time, they will be more consistent with protecting the life of the mother. And it won't be. I don't think there's been really situations where, I mean, they run these fear mongering campaigns that a woman had to die because of a difficult pregnancy. I don't know about that. I mean, it's extremely rare. And obviously, if that happens, sure, she should have an abortion. But it's kind of the amplifying of that is a lot of demagoguery that stirs up these women to go absolutely berserk. Many of whom probably have had abortions, with due respect.
Yeah. And the fact that this becomes an issue it's kind of ridiculous. I mean, I've confronted people and asked them, okay, how many abortions per year are you planning on getting? I mean, and what happened with the birth control and what happened with the morning after pill? And let's not worry about most of the abortions now are chemical, which is not a benign drug, by the way.
No, no, it's not.
So it because people get caught up in this. I'm sorry to say.
But do you
Uh,
think, Mike, it's going to really help defeat Trump? I mean, I want to
no,
bring it back to that.
no,
Um, you know, I think that she's become a cult figure, very similar to Bernie Sanders. The hard left and the kind of the student left and that whole constituency are making a lot of noise. They're very loud about it. Trump has brilliantly said, "Hey, if you support Bernie Sanders, you should support me." But I'm not into this authoritarian system. But and that Trump bringing up the business of whether or not she's black, you know, I don't know. He does it rather inarticulately. I wish that he could maybe put these things in a more careful context. But he's right. I mean, she never really identified as, not that it matters, but she never identified as black until she got into politics, and that's when she started putting black men in prison in California, where she kept them in there longer. I mean, I
yeah.
don't, does the left realize this? She kept thousands of black men in prison in California longer than they needed to be, so they could work slave labor to help corporate bourgeois corporations, multinational corporations, make a buck. Now,
But
what do
Chuck,
they
don't you
think?
realize none of that matters because it's the message, you know. Uh,
I mean, there's
she
this
just
one guy
happens
that's
to be,
been interviewed. He was on death row and he was innocent. And she's
yeah,
there trying to throw the book at him.
yeah.
I
No,
mean,
she's
what the
a
hell?
horrible person. I mean, what do you expect? How did her career start?
Willie, what's his name? The mayor of,
Yeah, Willie Brown and doing horizontal favors for Willie Brown. Everybody knows that
here
somehow.
he was 60-year-old married man, and she was like 28.
Yeah,
And he puts her on like several of these, talk about corruption. He puts her on the board of directors where she gets a fat check to show up at a meeting once or twice a year. I don't know. All these people do this. Hillary Clinton got all that when Clinton was governor of Arkansas. They all
yeah.
they put their spouses or their girlfriends in this case on payrolls of these corporations, and they get these enormous. This is how the rich, I mean, these people talk about the rich. I mean, this is the game. It was set up, mainly back in the days of Wilson, but they like give these plums to their political friends, and then the corporation gets favors from the government in exchange. I mean, like Clinton, in the case of Arkansas, he gets his wife put on about 5 different corporate boards, including Walmart, and then in exchange they get to dump bird shit in the water, throughout the state. I
Yeah.
mean, it's they look the other way. So the point is that it's so corrupt, and that was her start in politics. But again, I just fear that it doesn't matter because she's got all of the apparatus of the left internationalist power, making sure that she is going to be just sleepwalked right into the White House. she's another Obama, except she's worse. She's actually further left than Obama. Obama, I think, actually comparatively had a few scruples. She's just openly a literal communist. You know, she's talking like Mao Zedong with the business of like we have to disavow the past. That's not word salad. That's serious stuff. That's Marxism in its purest form. And I just think that if she's elected, there's no turning back. We'll never
Oh,
get rid of her.
that's a very good point. But
This is the last chance.
pivot a little bit to what does it take to win? All right. The Republicans could win by getting the votes of white women. All right. The pandering to minorities is absurd for the following reason. All right. Blacks are what, 13% of the population. Let's say in the state of Michigan, Donald Trump got all the black vote by magic.
Right.
Is that enough to move the needle?
Yes. Well, I mean, even if he peels off like 2 or 3 percentage points on the black vote, that combined with your conservative white or mainstream, vote, that could tip the scale.
But
Um,
wouldn't you agree
and he's
that
not going to get white suburban women. They're crazy. I mean, these are people who are not dealing. I mean, since I became aware of this, frankly, I mean, I kind of knew
well,
it
hang
anyway.
on. So you think they've deliberately ignored that demographic because it's hopeless?
You mean white women, suburban
Yeah,
white educated
yeah,
women? Yeah,
yeah.
it's not. That's gone. They're not. We're not dealing with people who are going to be reached. They just this is the Trump derangement syndrome. They despise Trump. They want to see. They're happy. They wish he was shot.
But
You know, they
why? But what? But they
there's no
can't.
rational reason for it. It's brain. Their brains have been manipulated. This is mind control. It's MK Ultra. I believe that. I think that their people have played to their emotion. I mean, they're talking about that Trump. Didn't you know that Trump attacked a woman? Really? They defended Clinton for 8 years. I mean, I know people in my own circle who told me I'm not allowed to talk about Clinton back then. And the fact that he raped Juanita Broderick and they had, talk about hush money. I mean, I
Yeah.
think they gave 750 million to Paula Jones and who knows
Now,
who else. You weren't allowed to talk about that. But with Trump, who at least has learned his lesson, I mean, he wasn't going on the Epstein Lolita Island. Clinton kept going after he was out of office. He went
yeah.
for like 50 times. But because it's Trump, and that they're going berserk over that. They're putting on the pussy hats. It's like, really? I mean, what about don't they know about Tara Reid?
Where did that all come from? I mean, I do not have an explanation
It's
for
not
how that went
rational.
so bad.
I understand that you don't like a man who is doing this. I don't either. I get that. They're pigs. But why single out Trump? What about I mean, Andrew Cuomo is not exactly, a paragon of virtue. What about, I mean, you could look at a lot of people. I mean, really? So it's obviously they're willing to be manipulated for political reasons. I mean, there's something about Trump that drives them out of their minds.
Could it have something to do with the fact that they're not fulfilled in their own life? All right. Hubby goes to work, and while I stay home and make the meals, clean the house, take care of the kids, and there has to be some more meaning in my life. So let me get political.
Oh,
And I'm
they don't
talking,
have any meaning in their lives. They don't believe in anything. They don't
yeah.
believe in God, certainly. They don't really, there's nothing going on in their cores. I mean, that's been the product of decades, if not a half a century, of this educational system and this kind of stripping away of faith in God. And so they've replaced that with hatred for, it's a complete classic case of psychological projection because they hate the other. I heard a comment on
The
Pod
other.
Save America, which is a far left wing establishment podcast, where he said that J.D. Vance wants to make women who have not had children second-class citizens. Really? I mean, that's a projection. They're the ones who view anybody, certainly Trump supporters, and anybody that doesn't zig heil and goose step to their view as definite second-hand citizens, second, who don't deserve. I mean, the language that they used during the pandemic and during the rollout of the jab for people who weren't going along with it, it was absolutely no different than the way the Nazis described the Jews. It was the same sort of authoritarian. These people are not human. They're subhumans. They're vermin. They have to be,
Well, why do you suppose, though? I mean,
terminated.
you go back to this educational system thing, but I don't remember that. Well, I mean, maybe you're right. Maybe a lot of kids bought into this and never questioned it, and then they just became like that. Um, and then they get more mad, as we said at the beginning of the show, when you try to confront them with it, where deep down they know they're wrong, but it's too late. I have a tiger by the tail, and I can't let go.
And I also think it's more than just that they bought into it consciously. I do believe that there is a subconscious agenda going on here. They control the culture. Andrew Breitbart famously said that politics is downstream from culture.
Right.
And the culture sends out subtle messages. It's like Chinese water torture. Bing, bing, bing. This is what, and they've used the social media brilliantly, I must say. TikTok, I mean, brilliant. And then they have Zuckerberg and Soros censoring anything that disagrees. You create this sort of, this tunnel. Google does something with the algorithms where recently, if you put in the word Donald Trump, you get Harris come up.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, they're obviously manipulating and they're fixing the election. Google can steal millions of votes that way, and they have that all over the world. They can fix an election. They can fix a culture simply by manipulating a couple of points in code, and making sure that certain ideas are not seen or heard, or they go way down the list when you do a Google search, because it's only natural when you do a Google search to look at the top piece that comes up first, and they can manipulate that. There are congressional hearings right now on this. I think that the attorney general, I think in Missouri, is bringing a lawsuit about it against Google. I mean, it's a huge control. I mean, of how we think. This is it's and they're doing it in spades. That's why I'm afraid Trump's going to lose.
Here's the sad part of that. It involves not so much the normies, but the people that should know better. And I just went crazy a couple of weeks ago when a book review was posted, a book written by Paul Offit, who's this big vaccine guy. All right.
Yeah, right.
Where he is now trying to rewrite history. That and this just came out. It's a conspiracy theory that the virus came from the Chinese lab. The vaccines weren't great. They never hurt anybody. It's like, are you out of your mind saying this now? Yeah. But they're true believers. They're all atheists.
And they're in control. Yeah. They control the high ground of our culture, of our media, and of our politics, and our economy, even in terms of the big tech. That's why I'm worried about this election. I think they're already starting to steal it. James O'Keefe has a couple of videos out where he's interviewed illegal aliens who are registered to vote. You have them openly opposing a congressional bill that simply would state that you have to be an American citizen to vote. They don't want to. They're already harvesting. They're meeting people at the border. You get these groups like SIAS and Catholic Charities. These are leftist organizations.
Catholic Charities are terrible.
Oh, yeah.
And I have to tell you this. As a Mass attending Catholic, I took it as a project to tell fellow parishioners, do not put money in that envelope for Catholic Charities.
Oh, they're the forefront of the whole immigration, and they're open about it. They want to help people not only come in the country illegally, but they want to get them on welfare. They want to get them registered to vote. Massachusetts, we just had the state legislature at midnight before they close. They do everything. That's how they've always done things in the state. The late Jerry Williams used to make jokes about how they have candles lit in the window, at 11:30, passing
Yeah.
legislation and signing bills. 100,000 illegal aliens are now going to get licenses. And if you get a license, that means you can vote. I can speak to this. I just had to renew my license. And immediately, one of the questions was, am I
You want
registered to vote? And
Yeah.
would I like to register? They weren't asking whether I was an American citizen, nothing
No.
like that.
No.
And then I've also got in the mail already an absentee ballot. I didn't ask for it. I'm just saying they're doing it. And Massachusetts is probably no different than most of the blue states and the border and the so-called battleground states. They are in the process of stealing the election. I
Well,
don't think that there's any
okay,
question about it.
but before you get too excited, they've always done that.
Yeah, but
It's
even Biden admitted that they've now worked it up to an art form. I mean, he said, we have the best vote stealing operation in history.
Okay, but here's the
Biden
point.
saying this. Sometimes Biden is a truth teller out of his own demented. He didn't mean to say it, but he did say it.
Well, of course he said it, but when I first noticed that things were wrong, I've been around for a few years. And California, when I was younger, was not overwhelmingly a blue state.
Right. That's right.
And if anything, the reputation was that Northern California was more liberal and Southern California was more conservative.
Right.
But then around after the tenure of Arnold Schwarzenegger, things dramatically changed. All right. But even then, the good news was that they recalled Gray Davis, which was ironically funny because he was not that bad of a guy. But all the fit hit the shan, so to speak, when he took over with the power issues and so on. Now, I think that there's been massive corruption going on forever. The fact that people notice it more now is, I guess, good. But here's the thing.
They really put in place the machine. And I think we even talked about how in 2012, Obama won several precincts in places like Detroit and the usual Philadelphia by like 98, 99, in some cases 110%.
Right.
Rush Limbaugh pointed this out. It was already done. I don't know if Obama stole the election from Mitt Romney, but I wouldn't be surprised. Mitt Romney didn't have the backbone to stand up, which is why he despises Trump, because it's like bitter sour grapes.
Well, why stop there? I think it's completely acknowledged that JFK stole the election from Nixon.
No. Look, we could go back to Jefferson. It's.
I think the thing
this isn't new, but the point is that now it's critical, and they're not. I don't see how it could go otherwise unless there is such an overwhelming outpouring of people, and that they start doing all the tricks that the liberal Democrats do. We have to start harvesting. We have to start going into the counting rooms. We have to start voting early. Vote for
I think they will. I think they will. But bear in mind that you have an extremely unlikable candidate with Harris. And
yeah, but do you believe the polls? I look at the Drudge Report. I know that they're left wing, but when you look at that, your heart sinks. It's like thundering forward. She's I don't believe it, but at the same time, I don't know. Is this
a sugar high based on the fact that you had a vegetable, and now you at least have a cent?
Well, that's what I think. That's what I think. But at the same time, it could be another Obama.
when she gets out there, she doesn't have any talent. It's not going to come out. I
I
mean,
don't know
at
if it
least
matters.
Biden
You
was
know,
around for
you
50
have to
years.
begin with saying, "Oh, I want to elect a woman." I mean, I'm going to vote for I'm going to vote for somebody because they have a vagina or because their skin is, whether she's black or not is beside the point. The
There's
point is,
always going to be people like that. But even if you acknowledge that about 30% of the people are irretrievably stupid, you're still taking a very articulate guy versus a woman who may have some accomplishments on her resume, mostly just fancy sounding titles. First of all, she's never done anything her whole life. And this is one of the other problems that's happened, I hate to say it, with this glorification of women. If you ask people, try this conversation once. What has Nancy Pelosi ever accomplished in her life? Well, she was a speaker. No, no, no. What has she accomplished? I'm not asking what titles she's accumulated. What has she accomplished? Not a goddamn thing. All right. So once you focus on that, then it
yeah, but
seems
again, I don't know if that matters. I mean, look, the left is going to prop her up. The internationalists, these people have the power. They're not going to expose her. They're going to. It's like Obama. She's a tabula rasa. They've already erased all of her leftist positions, and you can't even mention it. Biden was very proud to say that she was a diversity appointment. Look at me. I brought a black woman into the vice presidency. This is my greatest accomplishment. We need diversity. Now anybody that brings that up is racist. So I mean, they control how I mean, to a certain extent. I mean, this is like the Lester Holt world. They
you don't
still
think
have.
that's changed a little bit. Back in
I
the
think.
day,
Well, the question is, has it changed enough? Are they still going to be able to pull this thing, pull this thing off? I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's like they
my
really.
feeling is they're not going to be able to because they have the same playbook with a worse candidate.
I mean, I certainly believe that, and I hope so. But and I think that Trump has handled himself quite well. He's very good, and I think J.D. Vance is good too. But we'll have to see. I mean, these people are not messing around. They're going to do what they have to
They're not
do.
messing around, but don't confuse what the left wing media says with reality. All right. Maybe it was indelicate for JD Vance to talk about cat ladies, but don't you think for a
But it was
moment,
so true.
yeah, but don't you think for a
Oh
moment
man,
that someone who's got children, who really has a stake in the future,
that's
is
right.
going to
They
agree
have
with
more of that used to be actually a liberal talking point. Somebody would like, I know,
mention
like
that?
in
Yeah,
Boston. I mean, it was a big deal when Ray Flynn ran for mayor that he didn't have his kids in the public school system. It's like they were in private school, they were parochial school. It's like, wait a minute, you're going to be presiding over at that time, the school system was in great turmoil. You want to have somebody who has some stake in the community, and that includes having kids who come home and tell you what the hell is going on.
yeah.
I don't think that's particularly controversial. And also, by
No,
the
but
way,
what I'm saying, Chuck, is that they try to make a big deal about it with the talking heads. But look, even this hated suburban white women demographic is going to have to identify with the fact that, no, I have kids. And wait a minute, I'm tired of being run by cat ladies, or in the case of France, transvestites or whatever. Uh, I'm glad that JD Vance came out and said it. I don't really care what the media says.
right.
They're all phony.
And also,
And
by the way, they did like another one of these Trump hoaxes in that they took a statement that he made and they made it into they switched it around a little bit because he wasn't talking about women either. He also included Pete Buttigieg,
yeah,
who at that time didn't have kids, and and he also was very clear at the beginning of the statement to note that he's not against people trying to have kids. He has nothing but sympathy for that, and that
right.
people who are dealing with in vitro fertilization and their adoption, I mean, they're trying to have children. That is not what he was talking about. So he was clear about that.
And
But
Vance is answering back too, because this one moron, I forget her name, accused him of only being in favor of white kids when, of course, Vance is married to an Indian woman.
Oh yeah,
So,
he said, "Oh, do you know that I have like biracial children?" No,
yeah,
he's very good. He's very cool, and I think that's why Trump picked him. I remember he was on I think it was like Face the Nation, one of those big shows, and he just totally decimated the host when he started to bring up Trump's, been convicted, of a crime. He completely handled it beautifully. I mean, he's very, very articulate, and he's very careful, and he knows how to get down into like the mud with somebody and take them on, and he's not afraid to
does
do that.
anyone even care that you're not convicted until you're sentenced?
Well,
Does
that's
anybody
that's
care
right.
about
Or just this whole phony thing, anyways. And I mean, the nerve of that woman at the black, you know, uh, correspondence event where Trump went out and he spoke. Unlike, of course, Harris, she'll never speak to anybody but people who agree with her, like Cardi B or somebody.
no?
But I mean, right? But he was out there, and then she brings up, January 6th. Trump handled it brilliantly. He says, "What about the people who are looting black businesses and burning black neighborhoods after George Floyd's death? Isn't that an insurrection? I mean, really? And nothing happened. Anyway, the point is, Mike, I'm worried. I'm sitting on Spielkas. I just I look at this thing every day, and I'm wondering, it's the forces. We've been saying this all
Well,
along.
okay, but here's why you're worried. All right, maybe not deep down thinking that it could go wrong, but you're more upset that it's gotten as bad as it has. Okay, whether it's a pagan ceremony at the Olympics, whether it's the fact that you have a moron uh, who did horizontal favors to get to where she is, walking around with her soy boy. I mean, it's terrible. It makes me sick, frankly. All
It's
right,
awful.
but
Makes me nauseous to think
but
about it.
fortunately for you and me, we know too much. Okay, the normies don't delve in to all this crap. They don't know all this negative history, that how bad it is, and they're just looking at the moment, and that's fine. And I'm telling you, when that woman comes out and starts having to confront, I mean, she's got to worry about what she wished for. She wants to debate Trump. Good, have
Oh, I
at it.
can't wait. But I mean, I remember I felt nervous during the Biden debate with Trump because I didn't know what they'd pull off. And, it got better and better. I mean, I hope I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's like, she's terrible. And I mean, in debates, I mean, I think it was Tulsi Gabbard ripped her ripped her to shreds during one of those debates.
Well,
So,
and here's the point. Now that she ripped her to shreds, if you saw that thing, which you did, it was deer in the headlights. Tulsi is rattling off this litany of failures of Harris, and Harris is sitting there.
yes, and I hope Trump views that. I hope he brings her into his circle and really bones up on that, because that was classic. And Trump is, by the way, putting aside all these little distractions and these gotchas. He's putting out a pretty solid agenda. The Republican National Committee agenda is published and it's available. It is very
Yeah.
solid. He has said that he wants to stop taxing Social Security, which, by the way, was put in place, the one accomplishment by Senator Joe Biden, a bill that taxes Social Security, which is unjust, given the fact that you already paid taxes on the money before it went into that corrupt system. Getting rid of taxes on tips, things like that. Those are good, solid things for him to bring up. He is bringing up issues. I hope he stays with that. I hope he is just carefully drops those out there as he goes and continues to define what we should
Do
expect in the
people
Trump
realize
administration.
how insidious that was when they started taxing Social Security?
Oh, I mean, and not only that, but I mean, I had this debate with Barney Frank when I ran against him. It was one of my favorite moments when he says, "Oh, the Republicans want to get rid of Social Security." They bring up that lie every 2 years.
Right.
And I said, "Excuse me, but I think it was you, Mr. Congressman, who wanted to means test Social Security. wanted to raise the age of retirement. You're working around the edges and trying to reduce Social Security. Those things are opposed by Republicans. So, yeah, if any, it's classic, again, classic projection.
Yeah.
What they say you're going to do is exactly what they're doing. And plus, not to mention the fact that they're going to put 10 million illegal aliens are going to start to get Social Security benefits through a bunch of ancillary programs like SSDI and SDI, and it's going to bankrupt the whole thing. But never mind that. Anyways, but Mike, you seem to be somewhat bullish on Trump's victory.
Yes.
I feel really, really worried about it because of what I'm seeing.
Well,
So
I'm not being overconfident.
right.
But I think that you're so immersed in this stuff, and you're surrounded by liberals, which no, I mean that might be which I'm not. I mean,
That's my view when I see people that are just like going berserk. Yes.
Yeah, and I am certainly aware of this.
Yeah.
But I'm not exposed to it to the extent personally in your face like you are. But remember the famous Pauline Kael statement when Nixon won.
Yes.
I didn't know anybody that voted for him.
So, man, let's not get ahead of ourselves here, but that's going to be a beautiful thing if that happens. I don't even want to think about it because it's like, oh man, that would be.
Well, what was good about that statement is that if you put it in the context of the fact that how overrated that woman was and how ignorant she actually was of cinema, it was mind-boggling.
And that's
I'll leave you with this because I could not believe my ears.
Yeah.
And one of my friends in entertainment called me and said, I just couldn't believe what you said. She was praising a particular performance, doesn't matter the movie, doesn't matter the actor.
Yeah.
And how did he do it? And how did they put that together? And it came in a moment and all this stuff. Completely ignorant, I guess, of the fact that cinema is an editor's medium. That scene was probably retaken 7 or 8, 10 times. There's the definition.
It's all fake. And by the way, I heard a liberal. I was watching the Olympics the other day, and this Snoop Dogg is all over the place.
Yeah.
I pointed out, by the way, he endorsed Trump. He said Trump. He loves Trump, and he says that because Trump pardoned a couple of people that he knew. Anyway, that's all of a sudden it's like you could hear you could hear the whole atmosphere of the room change when I brought this up. Anyway, Mike, but you've definitely talked me off the cliff. I would say that, at least for today.
No, I mean, you were, I was worried about you. I was going to try to reach through the screen here.
I do feel that way. All right, so what's coming up in your Substack?
Well, we put something out a few days ago called The Battle Lines Are Clearly Drawn. We talk about the Olympics, which we beat to death here on this show.
Yeah.
But there's some good references on that particular article that may be of interest. And well, the one that people are going to like, again, it's from your good buddy, Michael Flores.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Where I have to say this because it's such a great story that the Olympics have always had controversy, judging controversy and so on. And of course, the biggest controversy ever in the Olympics was phony. All right. Hitler did not acknowledge Jesse Owens.
Oh, that's actually not true.
Right. But most people think it is true.
Right.
And as a matter of fact, what happened was Hitler, in fact, did wave at him from the stands. He didn't personally congratulate anybody because he left that day early.
Right.
And there was a long friendship between the guy who finished second or third, a German guy, to Jesse Owens throughout the guy's life, who died in World War II.
Oh, you're talking about Kurt Schmeling. Oh, he was the boxer. I'm thinking of something else.
No, but anyway, that's all. Michael Flores talks about it. But Jesse Owens looked up, the kid of this guy was at his wedding. So this whole thing was just crap. And it's still dutifully repeated to this day.
Oh yeah, no, look at not that Hitler, of course, was a nice guy.
Oh
Okay,
no, of course not.
I'm not saying, but yes, I mean this is a manipulation to make something look a certain way and make it look, the way you want it to look, and that's the same sort of cut and splice stuff that they're trying to do to
Well,
Trump
right, but do you know,
and to
Mr.
JD
Expert,
Vance
that the only guy that did snub Jesse Owens
was probably
was your
FDR.
friend? It was FDR. You're
Yeah.
exactly right.
Oh yeah.
FDR only invited the white athletes to the White House.
Oh yeah. I mean, I don't doubt that. I know that like the NPR likes to make a big deal over the fact that Eleanor Roosevelt hired black women to do like maid work at the White House. She didn't hire them because they were black. She hired them because she wanted to save money, and
Yeah.
she fired all the white women and brought them in at half the price.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't like some heroic.
Yeah.
It's like. Anyways, Mike. But
All right.
as always, thanks for joining me.
All right. Well, you have a good one.